Welcome to our first HCDC Data Talk, Neighborhood Gentrification in Harris County. We're so glad that you could join us today for the first webinar in our new series. My name is Katie Wang, and I'm the Program Coordinator for the Houston Community Data Connections Program here at the Kinder Institute for Urban Research. And before we get started with the main event, I just want to give you some background on the Houston Community Data Connections Program, or HCDC, as we like to call it. HCDC seeks to facilitate the practical use of data by city and community leaders for decision-making and capacity building in Houston's disadvantaged communities. In pursuit of this mission, we use neighborhood-level data to conduct community-focused research. The gentrification report that you'll learn about today actually follows this model in the sense that we used existing neighborhood-level data to dive deeply into the research question, what is the actual state of gentrification in Harris County? We also collect neighborhood-level data through community-focused research. So the next webinar will focus on this kind of project. One of our researchers collected extensive data from residents to highlight issues of safety in Gulfton, and you'll hear more about that in just a bit. In addition to conducting neighborhood-level research, we attempt to build other organizations' data capacity through training. So that can be in the form of webinars, as you see today, or in-person trainings. We do this because we believe that all of our research findings can be used to engage community members and stakeholders and to support decision-making in various institutions and settings. So we're currently in the program's second year of existence, and this year we're focusing on establishing valuable data-related trainings throughout the greater Houston community. So these trainings will include kind of data 101 type workshops, but also sessions on how to use our HCDC data tools and more. For example, we're currently collaborating with Fondren Library here at Rice University to deliver a series of 3 basic data literacy trainings to 3 different communities throughout Houston, including young students in the 5th Ward and nonprofit staff from across the city. So a core part of our HCDC program is the data products that are freely and openly available online to our users. These include our HCDC dashboard, which is a robust online dashboard that provides multi-purpose community profiles with a wide array of neighborhood-level indicators that highlight disparities and other local issues in the greater Houston area. So you can see a screenshot to the left of your screen there. That's what the user interface looks like on our dashboard, and there you can see sort of our 3 primary tools that we've created for users. The dashboard actually hosts over 100 neighborhood-level indicators and includes an indicator map that's very interactive in nature, community profiles, and a compare function that allows users to explore data from 2 to 3 different communities at once. So all of those, we've gotten great feedback, and we are still taking even more feedback to improve them for the needs of our community here in the greater Houston area. So we've also created the HCDC gallery. There you can see a screenshot of that on the right. And with that tool, we convert complex research and data into accessible and interactive visuals like graphs, charts, and maps. And these rich visuals can help to show the stories in data in ways that can help you share your own insights about the research that you do and the goals that you have. We also offer a number of data-related services, including data analysis, research design, and training. And these are all available upon request. And since the beginning of the program, we've received over 100 data service requests from nonprofits, researchers, and other local institutions. So our HCDC Data Talks webinar that you're part of right now is meant to add to the existing resources that we offer. So through this new training tool, we aim to showcase our research products, to further facilitate the use of HCDC tools, and finally to demonstrate how the data that we're showcasing here can be used in other initiatives and research that you may be doing. So with that said, let's go ahead and move into the first webinar in a new series. Just a few guidelines for participation. Please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen to type questions to the HCDC team during the presentation. We'll monitor these throughout the duration of the webinar and select a number of them to answer at the end of the presentation. So if something pops into your head that you want to know more about as Wendie is speaking, please go ahead and relate that to us through the chat function. Also, please don't start your own video during the presentation. We'll be sharing our screen, and so you don't need to share your own video with us as we're talking about gentrification today. And as always, if you have more questions about this or other services after the webinar, please feel free to email us at hcdc@rice.edu. We are available and we want to help you in any way that we can. So now with that, I'm going to hand it over to our research fellow, Wendie Choudary, who authored the gentrification report that's the subject of today's session. So we're going to transfer it over to Wendie.
Okay, great. Thanks, Katie. Again, my name is Wendie Choudary, and I'll be talking to you today about our recent study on neighborhood gentrification across Harris County from 1990 to 2016. So briefly, I want to provide a rundown of what I will cover in today's webinar. As Katie has stated, neighborhood level data is helpful in understanding that social and economic state of a community and its change over time. So today I will provide an in-depth example of utilization of neighborhood level data in showing gentrification patterns across Houston, as well as the probabilities of gentrification in the near future. So essentially, I will show you census tract level data and what you can do with this type of data. Pulling from our gentrification study. And then I will briefly touch on a few neighborhood level data use cases related to our neighborhood gentrification findings. So why are we studying gentrification patterns in Harris County? So one, we want to raise awareness of affordable housing issues. So neighborhood level data shows us that many communities have over 50% of renters paying nearly more than 1/3 of their income on housing costs. And that meets HUD's designation of cost-burden families. Second, we want to raise awareness to the issues of unwanted neighborhood change that can inequitably raise rents and property taxes, that can cause displacement of residents who are unable to afford to remain in their homes and have to involuntarily move out of their neighborhood and settle in less desirable communities with longer commutes, away from social ties, or leave the city altogether. So these unwanted neighborhood changes can dismantle communities' deep-rooted cultural traditions. It can deprive residents of local services, and it shifts distribution of residents across neighborhoods. So thus equitably revitalized change is preferred. So as researchers, we want to see what has happened in the past 20 or so years to highlight that state of gentrification across Houston. Then we use statistical models to identify neighborhoods with high probabilities of gentrifying in the near future, all with hopes that our findings will help communities to be aware of the possible changes and be prepared for those changes. So therefore, our key goals were to identify that state of gentrification in Harris County, as well as the probability of gentrification in the future. So we found that in terms of the state of gentrification, it has accelerated since 2000 in Harris County. Gentrified neighborhoods have been identified both inside and outside the 610 loop. And then in terms of the probability of gentrification in the future, socioeconomic, housing, transportation, and location factors most impact neighborhood susceptibility to gentrification. And finally, we found those neighborhoods susceptible to gentrification in the future are on the east side of Houston, inside the 610 loop. So for those who may not be clear on the meaning of gentrification, it is a process by which lower income neighborhoods undergo reinvestment through the influx of relatively higher income households. And this results in an economic overburdening for lower and moderate income households, often. So the process of gentrification can take on many forms, but common characteristics include disinvestment and reinvestment, loss of affordable housing, physical upgrading of residential neighborhoods, upward movements of residents' socioeconomic status. So therefore, gentrification as a type of neighborhood change not only overburdens residents due to rising housing costs, but it can also displace families who cannot afford to remain in their homes. And this changes the dynamics of a community. And one clarifying point in this study, we distinguish between gentrification and displacement. So gentrification is a specific process of neighborhood change. Displacement is a result of that type of neighborhood change. So due to the difficulty in tracking individuals' migration, let alone their reasons for moving, we're unable to definitively measure or identify where displacement is occurring at this time. We can, however, show where gentrification patterns are occurring. Okay. So to determine neighborhoods that are gentrifying, we first have to define what characteristics make up a gentrified neighborhood. So here we classify census tracts as proxies for neighborhood boundaries. So census tracts typically follow visible and identifiable features with populations between 1,200 and 8,000 people, but optimally 4,000 people. So neighborhoods must meet a twofold criteria to classify as gentrified, and those are vulnerability in the base year and specified changes over time. So because gentrification occurs over time, we first identify vulnerability in the base year. So say between 1990 and 2000 time period, the year 1990 would be the base year. Then we look at sociodemographic and investment change over given time periods. Okay. All right, so a neighborhood is considered vulnerable to gentrification if it exhibits 3 out of these 4 characteristics compared to the county median in the base year. 1, a higher percentage of low-income households. 2, a higher percentage of people 25 years and older without at least a bachelor's degree. 3, a higher percentage of non-white population. And or 4, a higher percentage of renter households. And again, that's compared to the county median. So here you can see an example of where the vulnerable neighborhoods appear in Harris County in the year 2000. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So once vulnerability has been demonstrated, a neighborhood has to meet a sociodemographic and investment change criteria. A sociodemographic change component is required because the process of gentrification includes an influx of relatively affluent households. So therefore, we examined whether the neighborhood's change in educational attainment or income and a non-Hispanic white population greater than the county change. So finally, a neighborhood has to meet an investment change criteria. We used median home value and median gross rent to reflect this investment in communities, and that includes the quality of various neighborhood amenities. So because high rents are indicative of market demand and home values in the area, but may not occur in step with each other, we allowed the investment change component to be either change in rent or change in home value greater than the county's overall change. Okay. So here, that light blue hue shows the neighborhoods or tracts that met the sociodemographic and investment change criteria, and thus gentrified between 1990 and 2000. There were 42 tracts that gentrified from 1990 to 2000, from the Tomball to the Washington Corridor to the LaPorte area. Okay. Here, this medium blue hue shows neighborhoods or tracts that met that change criteria and thus gentrified between 2000 and 2010. So here's the difference, okay? So there were 140 tracts that gentrified from 2000 to 2010, from locations from the east side of Houston to South Central like Sunnyside, South Park, and pockets of Alief, Sharpstown, and Gulfton, for example. Okay. And here, the darker blue hues show the neighborhoods or tracts that met the change criteria and thus gentrified between 2010 and 2016. So here's that difference. So there were 94 tracts that gentrified from 2010 to 2016. And as you can see, these emerging neighborhoods are filling in the gaps between neighborhoods gentrifying from 2000 to 2010. Okay. So these three maps show us that gentrification has accelerated since 2000. Very little gentrification occurred from 1990 to 2000, while the period between 2000 and 2010 saw that greatest change. But growing gentrification patterns emerged during that 6-year time period between 2010 and 2016. So because many neighborhoods experienced gentrification at multiple time periods, we created a gentrification typology for the neighborhoods. So tracts meeting criteria for gentrification are broken out into 3 categories: established, gentrifying, and continual tracts. So here's a visual representation of our gentrification typology. A tract is considered established in its gentrification if it has displayed patterns of gentrification in the past, but has shown little to no signs of current or ongoing neighborhood change. So we included tracts that gentrified in both the 1990 to 2000 and 2000 to 2010 time periods. And these are those yellow-orange hues. A tract is considered gentrifying if it was gentrifying from 2000 to 2010 and 2010 to 2016, or during both time periods. And these are all the varying blue hues. So a tract is considered continual if it was gentrifying during all 3 time periods: 90 to 2000, 2000 to 2010, and 10 to 16. And these are those 6 brown tracts. So after determining that state of gentrification in Harris County, we wanted to know that probability of gentrifying in the future. So our principal component analysis results indicated multiple key factors driving gentrification across Harris County, including housing, transportation, growth, amenities, jobs, crime. And so these results inform the variable selection for our probability analysis. Our probability analysis results are visualized here. We were able to predict the likelihood of neighborhoods gentrifying in the near future. Each tract is assigned a susceptibility index ranging from 0 to 100%. A tract with a higher susceptibility index has a higher probability that it will gentrify after 2016. So as you can see, results indicate that virtually all neighborhoods on the east side of Houston inside the 610 loop are susceptible to gentrification in the near future. And to highlight some of those areas, you can see Casual East, Sunnyside South Central, parts of Gulfton in the west, and even parts of Greenspoint in the north central. Okay, so let's move on to what you can do with these findings. Over 3 data use examples involving opportunity zones, community plans, and land use policies, and our gentrification results. So I want to show how neighborhood level gentrification data can be utilized. Okay, so one example looks at the recent Opportunity Zone program. So an Opportunity Zone is an economically distressed community where new investments under certain conditions may be eligible for preferential tax treatment. So opportunity zones are an economic development tool. That is, they're designed to spur economic development and job creation in underserved communities. These are the areas that would benefit from redevelopment and reinvestment. So last year, the state of Texas, Governor Greg Abbott, in consultation with local officials, selected and released their list of opportunity zones, which was tract level. So I have mapped those opportunity zones identified for Harris County in blue here. So there are 105 neighborhoods in Harris County that qualify as an opportunity zone. So, however, it is unclear whether opportunity zone tax preferences used to attract investment will actually benefit distressed communities. So research suggests that programs like this may redistribute rather than generate new economic activity. They may subsidize investments that would have occurred anyway, and they may displace low-income residents by increasing property values. So it's possible that opportunity zone investments will accelerate that gentrification process that is already underway, especially on the east side of the loop. So therefore, neighborhoods that are both an opportunity zone and at risk of gentrifying in the near future are of particular interest. So to remind you of our probability results, this is a simplified version of the susceptibility index I displayed earlier, except here we are only showing the gentrification probabilities over 50%. In other words, highly susceptible to gentrification in the near future. So there are 162 neighborhoods with gentrification probabilities over 50%. So from here, we made comparisons of these two maps. So as you can see, we have overlaid the opportunity zones map on top of the map with future gentrification probabilities over 50%. And the blue outlines represent opportunity zones. Okay. So restricting even further, you see exactly which neighborhoods had probabilities of gentrifying over 50% and which ones were also opportunity zones. There were 69 neighborhoods that are both highly probable to gentrify in the near future and are also opportunity zone neighborhoods. Therefore, 66% of opportunity zones are highly probable to gentrify in the near future. So noting this finding, organizations can be involved in opportunity zone efforts and developments to prevent potential displacement or unwanted neighborhood change, particularly in many of these neighborhoods at risk of gentrifying. Houston can use available tools to influence opportunity zone investments into certain types of investments, like housing. These opportunity zone investments may be more likely to benefit people who live in these underserved areas. So again, this is one example of how you can use neighborhood level data by overlaying neighborhood level maps of interest. So a second example looks at a case study we did involving OST South Union and the development of community plans. So in our gentrification report, we did case studies of 3 communities. One of those was the OST South Union community. So OST's proximity to major job centers, its access to highways, public transit, its volume of older housing, and its relatively high share of vacant units and lots makes it highly susceptible to gentrification. Our analysis of neighborhood changes happening between 2000 and 2016 shows that this community started gentrifying in the year 2000 and has continued to do so since. So as shown here, the bars in orange, OST's household income, median rent, homeowner costs, home values, and other housing and demographic changes far exceeded those of the county changes, so the bars in blue. So in the map on the left, you can see all of the single family units in the yellow color and the multifamily units in blue, and this is in the OST community, that are impacted by this influx of community change. So in response to many of these neighborhood changes, the OST South Union community created a plan for engaging neighbors to address these needs, their community needs, and prevent unwanted neighborhood change. So you can see the cover in the picture on the right. So in 2013, OST was selected by the Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC, Greater Houston, to become a Great Opportunities Neighborhood Partner, a GO neighborhood. So with a vision to transform the neighborhood into a healthy, vibrant, safe, and economically stable community. So in what they call a quality of life agreement, there was a total of 29 strategies and 8 opportunity areas were developed to support their vision. Over 400 people and dozens of organizations over a period of 2 years developed this community plans. So residents came together in small and large public meetings to improve the residents' quality of life. So the process started and will continue with interviews and discussions with residents to identify community strengths and opportunities to understand the issues that neighbors care about the most. So aside from leveraging resources across different sectors, such as economic development, environment, education, health, the community is also prepared to use their comprehensive plan as a tool to guide potential development projects while preserving OST South Union culture and history. So many of the communities identified in our probability map that lack plans like this may consider creating this type of community plan as a strategy. So finally, a third data use example looks at minimum lot size restrictions as a neighborhood preservation tool. Many residents are concerned about townhouse and multi-unit housing developments in or coming into the neighborhood. For some neighborhoods, dense development in locations where single-family homes once were is not a welcome addition and could put strain on infrastructure and lead to higher property taxes. So minimum lot size restrictions are one of the very few ways residents in Houston can prevent real estate developers from tearing down old homes, subdividing the lot, and building taller or denser housing. So minimum lot size restrictions actually encourages development that looks similar to the existing housing stock. So in addition to the OST South Union case study, we did another case study in our report, the 5th Ward, which you see here, which had a high susceptibility of gentrifying in the near future. So as you can see in this map, the 5th Ward has very few protected lots. So down on the bottom right in purple, very few. So since homestead exemptions indicate where homeowners live, those are the green spaces, it is possible for these identified areas to qualify for minimum lot. You would need signatures at least 51 to 55% of the property owners in the zone to approve minimum lot size restrictions. So this map is helpful to know which blocks to target if gathering signatures to petition for minimum lot size protections. So once you obtain a minimum lot size restriction, it stays in effect for 40 years. So using public data, county appraisal district's parcel data on homestead exemptions overlaid on top of a susceptible neighborhood of interest like the 5th Ward, you could review land use policies to know where the blocks are that could use tools like minimum lot size protections. So to conclude, neighborhood level data has many uses, and I only provided 3 examples of what you can do with our findings. Those are overlaying high probability tracts with opportunity zones, implementing strategies like community plans in high probability neighborhoods, and visualizing homestead exemptions to identify neighborhood blocks that can use land use tools like minimum lot size protections, such as those probable of gentrifying in the future. So today I have shown you how we use neighborhood level data to conduct community-focused research. I hope the research in the 3 examples I used today will help build data capacity and engage community members to support decision-making. If you're interested, we also have an interactive neighborhood gentrification data story in the HCDC gallery. That's all I have for you today. Thank you.
So thank you, Wendie, for that wonderful presentation. If you have any question that you haven't yet submitted via the chat function, please go ahead and type that in now. We'll give you a minute or two to think about that. But we have already gone ahead and selected a couple that we received so far during the presentation, and we'll go ahead and start with those. So I'll ask Wendie those questions, and she can give us her take on those. So first of all, we got a couple of questions around, is it possible to get data in the zip code format? Wendie, is it possible to do that?
The way that we have analyzed the data at the tract level, since tracts don't sum up to the zip code, it would be very difficult to get that data at the zip code level. You could overlay the zip code boundaries over our tract level map, but you're still not going to get the same. It's not going to come out evenly. HUD uses census tracts, so that's why we decided to do the analysis at the tract level. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that's helpful to explain why you chose the methodology. Okay, another question we have is, Wendie, you said that a lot of the high probability areas for gentrification are on the east side of Houston. So why is it that Houston's east side neighborhoods seem to be more susceptible to gentrification than other areas of the city?
So as of 2016, you do see more households in these neighborhoods paying more than 35% of their income on rent. You see more older housing, you see more townhomes. In terms of racial composition, they're predominantly non-white. So neighborhoods toward the southeast are more than 50% Hispanic within the 610 loop. And then neighborhoods toward the northeast within and right outside the 610 are more than 50% Black concentrated. And most of the residents on the east side, over 50% of the residents have less than a high school diploma. And also their median incomes are less than $50,000.
So they just seem to meet more of that criteria, right?
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, so another question we have is, why exactly has gentrification been accelerating more recently than in the years prior that you looked at in the study?
So it was more common during the 2000s than the 1990s because there was a more dramatic set of economic and demographic changes. And this can be seen across all of metropolitan America. So what we found is that it means that a higher share of the tracts or neighborhoods had increases in their white population, in their rent, in their home values, in their educational attainment, more than the county increases during that 2000 to 2010 time period than the 1990 to 2000 time period. So there were, okay.
So thank you for your response. Another question that we received is a pretty poignant and important one, I think, and it was a statement that there are over 100 or about 162 neighborhoods with over 50% gentrification probabilities that happen to be in predominantly Black and brown communities in Houston. Does this seem to be blatant economic disparity? That's the question that we received. And so could you speak a little bit to the role that perhaps race and class play in gentrification?
So housing values, according to literature like from the Brookings Institute, shows that the devaluation of assets in Black neighborhoods in U.S. metropolitan areas, 10% of neighborhoods are majority Black, and about 50% of homes in majority Black neighborhoods are undervalued compared to homes in neighborhoods with no Black residents. So differences in home and neighborhood quality do not fully explain the devaluation of homes in majority Black neighborhoods. Homes of similar quality in neighborhoods with similar amenities are worth about 23% less in majority Black neighborhoods. And so that report also found that metropolitan areas with greater devaluation of Black neighborhoods are more segregated.
Okay, so even though differences in actual physical homes and neighborhood quality do make a difference, they don't fully explain why communities of color might experience more gentrification or more devaluation, than others.
Right.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that's, I think, a really interesting topic that merits a lot more research. Okay, so in general, this is another question we have. What are the greatest social and economic issues that stem from gentrification? I think there's an idea sort of in our current social climate that gentrification has a lot of perhaps negative effects or things like that. But what from your research have you seen are perhaps the biggest social and economic issues that stem from gentrification?
So I think everybody would argue that displacement would be that greatest issue that people are concerned with, because you see the high housing costs, housing costs increasing. You see that a growth in more cost burdened families, those paying more than 30% of their income for housing. You see high housing costs also putting home ownership out of reach for low income households. And so also with limited affordable housing options, residents end up paying more than they can afford, which takes away necessary funds for healthcare, food, education. And like I said, the displacement, when residents are unable to afford to remain in their homes, they have to move out, settle in less desirable communities. They're moving away from, their family, their friends, their social ties, to much further areas with longer commutes. And in some situations, they may leave the city altogether. And I also mentioned that this type of displacement, if that occurs, it can shift that social and economic distribution of residents across neighborhoods, across the county.
Cool. So we have a statement and a question from one of our participants. It reads, "My concern is that the focus on gentrification underestimates the impact of long-term concentrated poverty and the displacement that occurs in declining neighborhoods. Have you considered the flip side of neighborhoods not gentrifying, i.e. continuous concentrated poverty?"
That's a good suggestion. I think that's something we'll definitely look into. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Okay, we're gonna wait for just a couple of seconds. We seem to be getting a few more questions, so we can look through those. Okay, so we have another one ready to go. The question is, how do you find a balance between revitalizing communities without displacing people?
So investment in communities overall is a good thing in terms of more amenities, local economy, physical upgrading. However, these projects should consider the possibility of adding affordable housing options in the community so residents have a choice.
Okay, so we chose to ask those questions because we got a few that were sort of similar in nature and we wanted to address those. But clearly, if you have more questions or want to continue this discussion, feel free to email us at hcdc@rice.edu. As always, as I said before, we're available and willing to help you in your research and in your questions in whichever ways that we can. So to wrap up here, I just want to give you a few things to be on the lookout for. The first is that you'll be receiving an online feedback survey that asks for your thoughts on this first webinar. Please take a couple minutes to complete that so that we can make our next ones even more useful. Like I said, this was the first in our new series, and so we can only learn from here, and you guys can help us do that. The second point I have is that our second HCDC Data Talk webinar will be on Thursday, April 18th at the same time from 1 to 2 p.m. This one will focus on street and sidewalk safety in Gulfton. I mentioned that at the beginning of this presentation. Our senior research fellow, Dion Nustikasari, has done some excellent and rich research on this, and she'll be here to discuss that with you on April 18th. Thirdly, we're launching our training page on the HCDC site. We're very excited about this. And it'll be located at datahouston.org/learn. Hopefully that's pretty easy to remember. You can visit that site to find more info on our upcoming webinars, as well as you can use that to access training materials that we've posted online at that address. So here is that interactive data story map that Wendie mentioned in her presentation. And this is also part of the HCDC gallery that I mentioned in my intro overview about the HCDC program. So here you can see we've converted our neighborhood gentrification report into this cool interactive story map format where you can get an overall understanding of the methodologies that went into the report, the definitions, some fun infographics that help to visualize all of that. And down here, you can see, here's an interactive map. I think this would be helpful to many people wanting to know more about this report, where you can see the different typologies, the neighborhoods according to the typology index that Wendie created. And so here you can see whether neighborhoods gentrified from 1990 to 2000, 2000 to 2010, and so on. And so you can see which neighborhoods gentrified when using this interactive map here, and you can click on them and see it that way. Yes. So that's a really useful tool that's included in this story map. And then I also wanted to highlight another down here. So it's similar in terms of it's a map, but this one is showing the future susceptibility of these neighborhoods to gentrification. And so you can see that the darker neighborhoods there, they have an over 75% chance of gentrifying in future years. And then the lighter colors show a smaller susceptibility. And so you can visualize the likelihood and probability of gentrifying neighborhoods here with this map. And finally, as always, and as I've reiterated time and again, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, etc., please email us at hcdc@rice.edu. We've recorded this webinar, and so we will send out that recording in the same email that we ask you to complete that survey that I mentioned before. So you can share this with your colleagues, friends, family who you might think would be interested and who couldn't make it today. So be on the lookout for that in that survey email as well. Okay, we're gonna call it here. So thank you again for participating, and we hope to connect with you soon.